Welcome back to the Clay Smoothing Techniques Part 2. If you haven't watched last week's video, I recommend watching it. This week I'm going to be covering an easier method to smoothing out a detailed texture on a sculpture. Because even though I do have texture here, like I explained, I still want to smooth that out, okay? And I got to fill in a little bit of these indentations and cracks. So I will retain the texture in the clay, however, I'm going to smooth it out just a little bit without affecting it. If you watched last week's video, you'll remember the citrus spray. That's what I always use, but you can use mineral spirits. For oil-based clay though, I just love citrus spray. It's just, easiest for me to use, and it seems to have the most minimal impact while actually kind of smoothing out that clay just where I want it. And I went over the detailing tools, and then I kind of explained how that wasn't really the easiest method because they do affect the surface of the clay a little bit. Okay, so this week I'm going to be showing you how I use a brush. So these are the brushes that I got. The reason I chose these is because they have the long bristles and they're very soft, okay? If your bristles are too firm or they're too short, you can actually affect the texture of the clay. Remember, I just want to smooth it out. I don't want to actually flatten out any texture. That was a lot of work to go to. So I decided to go with these brushes. They're called edge brushes. You can get these at the hardware store for like a couple bucks. I'll put a few links down below if you want to just buy them online. You also want to avoid cheap brushes. Trust me on that. These really aren't that expensive, for a couple bucks. You can reuse them too, just so you know. It's not like, painting with gesso or something where you have to throw it away. When you're doing this, you can reuse these brushes, no problem. But if you get those cheap brushes, what's going to happen is they're going to leave little bristles that come out of the brush. Those are going to get stuck to the surface of the clay, and you're going to have to take the time to pick those off. That is really annoying, and it's bound to happen with a cheap brush. So just spend an extra buck or two is what I recommend, and get something a little bit nicer like this. So let's take a look at how this works. Now, if you find this video helpful or you enjoy it, be sure to hit the like button by clicking the thumbs up down below, and subscribe to Fritz Hoppe on YouTube for more sculpture tutorials. I'm going to be putting a little bit of this citrus spray down here, and you can use your finger to apply some of it to the sculpture, but when you have a brush like this, you can actually just put it right on the brush. Okay, and then just very lightly I'm going to brush the surface of the clay. Now you have to give this some time because that citrus spray has to take a few moments to kind of break down the very surface of the clay just a little bit. Okay, so just let it sit on there for maybe a few minutes, and then slowly and carefully just brush it. Maybe in I just kind of take the side of the brush here on the bristles and I just brush it towards me. Dab at it just a little bit, just to kind of fill in there, because remember I said that the rubber from the mold will seep in there and it'll get caught while it cures. I don't want to damage the mold on this piece. Just the slightest brush with your fingers will really smooth that out and blend it in just a little bit. You kind of have to figure out using a light touch when you do that. You can see how this is a lot more effective than using those detailing tools, except for when I want to, and remember to tip or cover the tip of this with a little bit of the citrus spray. I want to come in and I want to just kind of like, fill in a little area. Or if you see an imperfection that you don't like. You probably can't even see that, but I am a perfectionist of details. Because the slightest change in a sculpture, especially the surface of it or the texture, can change the whole look of the piece. So I will spend hours and hours and hours obsessing over the finished piece and making sure that every imperfection is either non-existent or it is the way that I want it, because art is never perfect. I'm not just trying to copy something out of real life. I'm trying to develop something new from a vision in my head. That's kind of what art is about, unless you're doing hyperrealism. But hyperrealism is a very interesting form of art, and I've just never really been too interested in doing that. I don't know why, but hyperrealism, when you look at those large pieces of like naked people laying down on the middle of the gallery floor, or like the baby, you've seen all that by that one famous artist. It's really cool, and it can probably make people think and feel different things, but it's so real that it's kind of gross. It does have sort of a gross feeling that it gives, and I think it's supposed to do that, kind of. But some people may say that about my work here, because I've had a lot of people tell me that this reminds them of the Body Worlds exhibit. And I can't say that that's why I created this piece, but I wanted to create a contemporary new type of texture for it. Something that, is just pure human. You can't really see his face, or what type of skin he has, but you just see that he is a human form holding up this bison skull. And there you have it. So you can see how that just barely blends in the texture of the clay. It kind of like melts the surface. That's how I would describe it. This is actually the medium J-Mac Classic dark brown oil-based clay. This is sulfur-free. Sulfur clay, like the Roma Plastilina, will actually help you achieve a smoother surface. They're both about the same thing, so I usually stick with the J-Mac just because the molding materials I use are not compatible with sulfur clays, but there are thousands of different ways to mold, or different materials if you're doing a rubber mold. So you can kind of see that those little pieces of clay that I slowly built up are kind of blending in just a little bit. Okay, and remember, I don't want to go too much here, but I will dab just a little bit here. I do like to always have paper towels handy because this stuff does kind of stick to the end of your fingers a little bit, and the melted clay does. So I want to try to keep from smearing too much of it around. It will build up on the end of tools too, or the brush even. The brush usually I don't need to clean though. This base here, because it has kind of a rougher texture, and when you take a sculpting tool like this and you carve away and you get kind of that, you can see some of those rough edges, or you get bits of clay in here like that. If you can see that okay. I'm just going to kind of rough this up a little bit to provide a good example here. If you can see the difference over here is where I already smoothed some of it out, but here I have not. So I'm going to take some of this citrus spray, and then you can watch right before your eyes as I blend this out just a little bit. And I'll take my finger you can put it on pretty thick, but once it really starts to melt away that surface of the clay, just be really careful with it, like I've said. It's really strange how it works because it really doesn't affect the actual form or texture of the clay. It just melts the surface, but it doesn't like eat through the clay. It doesn't have any chemical reaction. It's just perfect, and then it dries up when you're all done, and you get kind of over here, if you can see that. So I just take my time and just work away at it. I chip away, I guess I should say. And then, like I said, you can take your different tools. I have a few different options here. I'll probably use this tool and kind of get in there in the crevices and different cracks of the clay and work out some of those little details that might be bothering you. Like I said, I don't want it to be 100% perfect because I like to use my artistic license, but I don't want it to look sloppy. It's got to be very well done. And I'll go back over with the brush. And you can, dab a little bit, just do it minimally. Using a little bit of a circular motion like that will also have a good effect on the surface of the clay here, kind of helping you to blend in some of the rougher patches. So what I'll do is I'll usually, apply the stuff, a little bit of circular motion, and then I will brush back or come over with my finger and just kind of smooth out. Like it's almost like you buff the high points, like that. And once it dries, it gives it a really nice effect. Once it's all dried too, you can even come back in and you can take any type of sculpting tool and you can continue sculpting. I'll sometimes, like, you know, come around the edge here and kind of trim up the edge of the base, or I'll trim any little bumps that are on the piece that didn't get smoothed out. So that's it for today. Hit the like button by clicking that thumbs up down below if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe if you haven't yet. All the products that I use in this video are down below in the description. The Dissolve It spray is the same thing pretty much as the Goo Gone. Either one works for me, so you can try out whichever one you prefer, or you can go with something else if that's what you're used to. But that's all for today. This is part 2 of clay smoothing techniques. Check out the rest of the playlist if you haven't seen them yet. I will see you all next time.